All right, let's go for it, Karan. You ready?
Yes.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited to dig in today and talk to you about student engagement in this new world we're living in. We've seen a ton of schools. Karan and I work with a lot of different schools doing very different things. And we're really excited to take this opportunity to talk through some of the challenges, some of the best practices that we're seeing, and how we can kind of support folks in this really, really challenging time. So just a couple quick housekeeping items. This will be recorded. We will send a copy to everybody after the session is over. And we'll have about 15 minutes at the end allocated for Q&A. So please fire off questions throughout. They will not go unanswered. If we get too many, we'll absolutely follow up with you via email and make sure that you get the answer that you're looking for. So fire those in throughout the session and we'll jump in. Karan and I are going to make this really interactive. So we're not going to have slides in your face the whole time. We'll be shuffling back and forth. And that's about it. So let's dig in. We'll start with some quick introduction. So I'm Luke Sophinos. I'm the founder and CEO of CourseKey. Some background on who we are and what we do is we're really a teaching and training platform, and we focus specifically on career education. We work with a ton of allied health, nursing, cosmetology, beauty, trades type schools. We help them power attendance, engagement, right, social learning, and a lot of different capabilities around retention, compliance, and efficiency. So that's us in a nutshell. And let me pass it over to Karan, who's a founder and CEO at GetSet.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Thanks for having us, Luke. GetSet is a community platform. We've built a purpose-built community, which is really about helping students be successful and helping them get connected with their classmates. So the first thing students do is they set up a profile. They identify with some affinities, like I'm a veteran, I'm a parent, I'm a first-generation student, and their whole set of them. And we help them get connected with other people like them, so they feel like, hey, lots of people like me are successful at your institution. We help them get connected with those peers to get and give advice. And one of the things we're able to do, because it is a social community for your students, is we really get them to open up. We get them to feel like this is a safe place to talk about whatever's concerning them, whatever they're excited about. And what that allows us to do is to build these trending terms word clouds and give you a lot of insight into what's the pulse of my student body right now. What are they talking about? What are they concerned about? And we do sentiment analysis on that to help you understand, are there areas that you should be addressing so that you can be proactive in driving retention and enrollment.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Karan. Appreciate it. So let's dig into the topic though, student engagement in this COVID world. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and pull back Karan and I's not beautiful faces for y'all, but we do our best. So look, let's talk about what's happened over the last 6 months, right? So COVID hits kind of end of March timeframe, and we see this massive push to online education, schools, panicking, right? Trying to figure out what can we do to continue to service our students in the best manner possible. And I think the shift that happened for the most part was everybody, threw on a web conferencing tool, threw up Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever it was, and just kind of stitched this together, had the same, face classroom experience, but just over Zoom. And that was kind of it. And it was really a mess, right? People, students and parents understood it. It was unprecedented. It was a pandemic. They got that was the only way to really make it work in the short amount of time that was, basically available to us. And post that, we're now what at current 6 months, right? 6 months since the pandemic has happened, and we're still seeing schools, we're still seeing institutions kind of leveraging only like a Zoom LMS type model. So talk to me a little bit, Karan, about how you've seen that shift with your customer base, and then I can play on it as well with this initial hit, and then now we've had 6 months. Where are we?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Luke, one of the things that we're seeing, because we do all this sentiment analysis on student conversations, is we can see what students are saying about their own experience and what they're talking about is going on at their friends' schools or their neighbors' schools or their cousin's school. And so I think what happened in March is everyone was in the same boat, right? Every school scrambled. People did a heroic job of getting everything online. And I think at that time, students had a very kind of deep empathy with their institution. They're like, we're in this together. I'm really glad that my school has done all this. I realize it's not perfect, right? Everybody was kind of willing to adjust. I think what we're seeing now is students are talking about like, how is the experience at my school different from what's happening at other schools, right? So some students are saying, I'm really glad that my school is doing all of these things because at my best friend's school or at my cousin's school, that's not the case. I'm seeing that, you know, all these other things are going on. And remember, GetSet is just one microcosm of social media, but because of all the analysis, we're just able to spot things really quickly. And I think we're seeing this more broadly across TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and Insta, which is students are now saying that like my school is doing something different. Those schools look really good because they're going above and beyond just having classes on Zoom and discussions in the LMS. They've actually done things that are different. And then you have some students saying, well, this was fine 6 months ago, but now, like, why are we still doing the same thing that we had in the beginning of the pandemic? So I think there's now going to be this bifurcation where some schools are going to actually gain a lot, where they're going to have really good retention and it's going to help drive enrollment. And you've got a different set of schools that I think will potentially lose enrollment because students will say, well, that school hasn't really done anything different.
Absolutely. They're comparing notes with each other, right? And I think this upcoming fall, when we always see spike in enrollments, regardless of, you know, schools that have frequent starts or not, is going to be a huge test for institutions, because if they fall into that camp that you mentioned, that they, you know, they have this suite of technologies that make this online experience feel almost like it's in person, or at least close to it being in person through, you know, kind of an arsenal of software, they'll be in a good place. If they're just doing the same thing that happened 6 months prior, the students are going to show up and say, what the hell? I thought, you know, this is what happened 6 months ago. We haven't adopted, we haven't changed, we haven't gotten better. Like, you have to meet us halfway, right? To some extent. So how do you feel about schools, like specifically looking at students? Are they savvy consumers? Are they going to pick up on this?
So I think students get savvier and savvier every day, right? And part of it is what's making it complicated for schools to manage that message, right? Traditionally, you could be like, okay, well, I'm going to monitor what's written about me on Trustpilot or Yelp. But now there are just so many places that students are having conversations that are even challenging to monitor. And this is where it comes back to, you need to control the key experience so that the students are going to go and say good things, right? You can't, it won't happen 100% of the time. To give you an example of how some schools are being really innovative from an enrollment standpoint, for example, right? As traditionally, students would come on campus, they'd visit, they'd walk around, right? They'd be like, oh, I like these facilities, I get to meet some people face to face. Now, even if your school is open, right, physically, there are a lot of students that may be more cautious about coming to visit in person. And so they're relying even more heavily on your website and what they're reading online than ever before. And what we're seeing some schools do is actually opening up their online student community to prospective students to say, hey, Luke, if you're interested in our school, you can come and talk to some actual students. And so those are the kinds of schools that I think are getting a big leg up, because they're saying, look, don't just rely on our website, like come actually talk to students. And the advantage of the students coming to talk to the students in the school, the prospects coming to the school's own community, is that's somewhere where the school does have a little control and can actually see what's going on, as opposed to letting the students just go out to general social media for those answers.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we talk about the schools that you feel like are prepared, and we have a big base of clients that, you know, we get to cross compare different schools, what they're doing in different areas. And it's amazing to look at 200 schools and see, you know, wow, these guys are incredible. They're so ahead of the game. What is the arsenal for, you know, we have looks like 50, you know, different schools on the webinar today. Like, what does the arsenal consist of to create that good experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first part is just, do you have a way to listen to students, right? That's the first thing. And the neat part about having an online community is it's an automatic way to listen to what's going on. But then schools also need tools that allow that listening to happen at scale, right? It's really tedious to have to sit there and be like, okay, I'm scrolling through like the Facebook group for my school. So this is where having purpose-built tools which are designed for that make it easier. I think we're seeing a lot of schools also really focus on engagement and attendance, right? And so this notion that traditionally, like in a physical setting, obviously schools did care about attendance, but online, the question becomes much more complicated, right? It's really easy for us to fire up Zoom and, you know, we have all these lovely participants who I know are 100% engaged in what we're saying. And, but the challenge in a class on Zoom, right, is like, students turn off their cameras. You don't know how engaged they are. So I think tools that allow the school to have instant and rapid feedback are really, really crucial. And I'm sure everyone on the call today has seen a lot of the data that's coming around student well-being and mental health.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, it was not only incredibly depressing to see this data, but it was just shocking, was that 60% of US students enrolled at higher ed institutions had some form of suicidal ideation during the pandemic, right? That's a mind-boggling number of people that we need to wrap our arms around and give them like the deepest care possible. And I think the thing that a lot of the really sharp schools are realizing, Luke, is that the school support is incredibly valuable and important, right? Like advisors calling students, checking in on them, having Zoom sessions. But more so than that is students really need each other, right? They really need a lot of that experience of going to one of your great schools. For all the folks on this call are the other people in those programs, right? If I'm in an allied health program, the opportunity to meet other people who are interested in the same career path and that we're going to go out into this world together and be in those careers together. So finding ways to make sure your students don't lose the bonds they have with each other, because that's a lot of what's keeping them going.
Especially in an online setting, right? Because no longer can they tap, you know, the person next to them and become friends, get their phone number, become classmates. But in an online world, they almost feel alone, right? Like having 50 people on the Zoom call is not
exactly
the same as them being next to each other. So yeah. I love that theme, Karan. I feel like we could almost encompass it into, you know, one clear umbrella, which is just access and understanding of real-time information. Like, is your institution set up to understand key characteristics in real time, right? You talked about attendance. Do you know across, you know, all your classes at the same time, who's not there while they're not there, not the day after, not a week later, like right now, are they not there or are they there? At a student success level, not at a teacher's level, someone who can actually go and intervene right away. You talked about being able to monitor the interactions between students, right? How are they feeling about you know, their school, right? How are they feeling about their coursework? How are they feeling about their instructor, right? That's a fantastic form of engagement, is being able to monitor that. So what else am I missing outside that falls under this real-time banner and schools being able to see it on a dashboard right away and act on it?
Yeah, well, before we do that, Luke, I wanted to point out like one key thread there is really, I know you touched on it, but I think it's really important to emphasize for everyone on the call is traditionally a lot of data that career schools have is what you might call post-mortem data, right? It's like well after the fact. Well, okay, let's go look at that last start and why did this many starts not complete the term, right? So like, what happened in that process? Why did our funnel shrink that way? And I think what you're really referring to is the data that is immediate in that we can act on it now. So whether that's attendance, class engagement, and the ability to turn on a dime and really be responsive, I think that's really what's separating the schools that are going to thrive versus the schools that are really having a hard time. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is that it's never too late to make that shift, right? Is that students notice it immediately. To give you a really tangible example, one of the things that I think is really bad right now during the pandemic is that rumors about things that might or might not be happening at the school are spreading faster than ever before, right? There's this general sense of fear. And I think the way social media works is that rumors just spread really, really quickly. So for everyone in the audience, without naming the school or the specific program, we had a school that they had a smaller, they had I think they had 6 programs offered at their school. And the smallest program all of a sudden became the most trending term in their student community. So they went on our dashboard and they saw it and they're like, this is weird. Why would our smallest program all of a sudden be like the most talked about topic at our school, right? It wasn't COVID, it wasn't social distancing, it wasn't mental well-being, it was the name of this program. They clicked on it and they saw that the conversations on the program were 90% negative. And they were like, this is crazy. And so then they were able to go look at the post, Luke, and they saw what was happening is literally the gentleman who ran the program, I don't know, for family reasons or whatever reason, was like, I'm resigning. That email went to all the students in this small program. And literally all the students went on the student community and were like, oh my goodness, like I still have this many courses left, blah, blah, blah. Like, is the school gonna drop this program? Do I need to look somewhere else? Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go into this career path now. Like, what do I do, right? And to give you a crazy example, the school literally was, knew that the person informed them the same day. It wasn't a planned, they weren't really well informed. And the school had to scramble, but because the school saw this, the school was that evening able to send an email to all the students, not just in the program, but the whole school, and say, just so you know, like all of our programs are staying, and this lady is going to be the interim head of this program, and there's nothing that's changing. And you could see, like, within the next 3 days, the sentiment went 90% positive. So I think there's just this hyper sensitivity right now. And look, for everyone on the call, I can only imagine how many stresses and challenges there are in your jobs today. You guys are going through an incredibly difficult time, and I have a ton of respect for everything you're doing. So Luke and I aren't trying to put another thing, right, on your plate. You already have a lot of things on your plate, but actually trying to say, like, are there tools that can lessen all the things that you have on your plate and allow you to focus on the things that we know you're really good at?
And the things that matter, right? So you like retention, enrollments, these big topics that are really key initiatives at every institution, and
Exactly.
not the administrative work, not the, like you said, going through, Facebook feeds or manually doing attendance or trying to understand engagement through postmortem surveys. Like, you mentioned something that was super interesting there, and I want to play into it a little bit, is because I think it follows the retention theme perfectly. Had that school not been able to access that information, would that chatter still have happened? Yeah, you can't control it, right?
Exactly.
And where would it have happened and would the school have had access to it?
Yeah, the school just wouldn't have even known, right? Because the school hadn't told. And this is also, I think, Luke, a challenge where schools have relied a lot on purely LMS-based discussions. So I think, and this is again coming back to in March and April, when every course went on to Zoom, Teams, the LMS, schools were doing everything they could. And I think what's happening now is that as students are adapting to some of those changes, the problem is, like, if a discussion happens in a class-based forum in the LMS, there's almost no way that data is being aggregated into some quick, visible, visual way where you can know what's going on, right? So it would literally be a matter of luck if an instructor was just scrolling through some discussion in her class and saw, oh my goodness, why do students think that this program that I teach in is ending, right? It would be luck that was discovered, as opposed to the intentionality of, like, hey, this is being surfaced to you because we're worried about it.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, for our audience, a lot of the challenge that stems from education technology products in general is they're typically not built for career education.
Exactly.
Right? they don't have career education in mind. They start at major 4-year colleges, and they're built for, you know, white collar training and students that are probably, you know, from a you know, higher, like family income, excuse me. So talk to me a little bit about, like, when we talk about the digital arsenal, how valuable it is to not copy giant state college A, because they have different compliance requirements. They have all this, they have a lot more on their plate, to be honest, that they have to manage and deal with because of the regulation.
Yeah.
So how do you tie that into the mix here?
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful question, Luke. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that you pointed out is in being careful and mindful of your student demographics. And, you know, all of us are here on Zoom today, and, you know, most of us, if not all of us on this call, have amazing broadband at home. I have fiber at home, and I still have issues on Zoom, right? I had a call this morning where, for whatever reason, I guess everyone in my building is, you know, on morning calls, and my call dropped for 2 minutes. And I got a phone call from one of the participants being like, hey, you just dropped off at a really important moment in the call. What are you doing? And I was like, my connection isn't strong enough, right? So as we think about our students that may not even have those kinds of digital broadband access resources at home, it's really important to make sure that we've given them avenues which are technology-based, but not always video-based. And I think this is a really critical thing when it comes to making sure that they don't need to have a broadband connection to use whatever those tools are, right? Whether it's a tool that's helping monitor their engagement and their learning in the classroom, or it's the student community, that things can be done through texting or in a low bandwidth format, because that means that those students then don't feel excluded. Like, one of the things that we've seen where, and, you know, it's, again, with the best intentions, where career schools have sometimes just grabbed what they saw other schools doing, is we saw a school where basically they saw that, hey, this other school is doing all of their virtual orientation on Zoom. Not to say that the 4-year school really had a great idea either, because having 300 people show up on a Zoom call, as anyone who's done one knows, that once you go past like 4 people trying to talk, it doesn't work. And for the career school, they had a serious issue where a lot of students just didn't participate because, you know, at the time that they did this virtual orientation, it was in the evening. As you guys all know, evenings are an awful time bandwidth-wise because people are on Netflix or whatever, so internet is terrible in general. And so the school had a really large percentage of students not even show up for their orientation, right? Versus being able to do something in a low bandwidth format where it was text-based, hey, introduce yourself, meet people like you, right? So I think you asked a great question there, Luke.
Let's dig into the virtual enrollment piece, though, because I think that's really important. So, you know, career schools and the folks that, you know, CourseKey and GetSet both service, they have frequent starts, right? They don't have a giant start in the fall and a giant start in the spring. Right. They have starts every, you know, as I've seen, as fast as every 4 weeks, right? How do you run a successful virtual orientation when you have those frequent starts and you're in this COVID world where everything's online? Like, how are you helping people do that?
So first, for everyone on this call who does have frequent starts, you should look at that as a big advantage you have, which means that for most of the traditional schools that don't have another start till January, and frankly, that start will be a very small one compared to this one, if they didn't get it right now, it's a long time till they can get it right. But for everyone with frequent starts, you still have all these opportunities coming up in the fall to nail that orientation experience. To get really into that question, Luke, is as we think about what creates a great virtual orientation, I think the challenge is that a lot of schools, and we get where this comes from, right, is we saw what happens in the physical or analog world, and we said, well, let's just do that digitally, right? So we're like,
yeah,
that's why we use Zoom for everything right now, right? We're like, okay, well, students usually come in and they raise their hand, they introduce each other, and they say which program they're starting and tell us a little about their family background, like why are they here? They're like, oh, I'm a parent and I really want to do this for my kids, or I'm kind of tired of having a job. I really want to have a career, right? Something that I can see upward momentum and growth in. all of the reasons that career schools are really appealing to students are also things that students need to hear from each other, right? And as you think about it, right, a lot of the students that our partner schools on this call are enrolling are students that are here for a really deeply meaningful reason. This isn't just like a checkbox. It isn't just, hey, like I graduated high school and now I'm just doing the next checkbox. They've thought about this. They're like, this is what I want to be doing with my life. And when they connect at a physical orientation with their peers and they hear that, and they're like, oh, Luke is here for the same reason I am. Luke's also just like me. We have the same background. That's really meaningful. So as we think about how do you recreate that online, Luke, we can't just be like, okay, well, all 75 of you, you're on the Zoom call, like you can do breakout rooms. Well, breakout rooms just, yeah, I mean, it's kind of there, but imagine if I could go on an app and I could actually get matched with, the app would say, by the way, there's 7 people like you here and you should meet all of them. And I'm like, huh, you're also a veteran, Luke. That's really cool. So it's just the opportunity to reimagine what we do digitally rather than just trying to make the thing that we did in the physical world happen in Zoom.
No, I love that. And I think I hear it all the time. It is, well, we pointed it out earlier, right? Is are schools asking themselves the tough questions of, are we just trying to replicate the same thing that's happening in person via video conferencing? And is that good enough? Or are we going to actually meet students halfway through kind of this arsenal of tools, right, that we can leverage? So it's a challenging thing.
Yeah, I think something that, I know that you and I have talked about this in the past and you've helped some of our clients with this, is I'd love for you to kind of share how, you guys have helped schools adapt, because you've obviously had a lot of success in supporting schools with attendance and really tying that back to what does that mean for student engagement and what does that mean for retention at the end of the day. I think it'd be great for folks to hear like how you're doing that in the digital world, because I remember when you just for background for everyone on the call, Luke and I talk pretty much every month, just as friends, as fellow founders in the ed tech space. And when Luke shared some of the things that he and his team have been up to, I was like, that's amazing. That's just really, really thoughtful in how do I use new technology to do things that we just didn't need to do before.
No, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, Karan. So look, I mean, we have a big focus on kind of 3 key areas. It's attendance, it's engagement, right? And it's social learning and analytics. So when we look at engagement, it all starts with attendance, right? You have to show up, you have to be there, you have to be present. And when we look at the digital transformation of what's happening, you got to make sure that when we're on Zoom conference calls, when we're on video conference calls, that people are actually tuned in, right? You mentioned earlier, you're shutting off your camera. You don't know if the student's half asleep. Like there's a lot of challenges around that. So I think one is making sure that you have a system in place to frequently check and ensure that people are there, right? Is step one. You got to show up to be successful, right? Life 101. And then number 2 is we like to call them engagement questions, right? So taking important pieces of your curriculum and being able to push those out, right, throughout a synchronous lecture. It's not okay anymore to just put up a PowerPoint, lecture through it for an hour, and at the end say, awesome, great guys, go take your test now. Hope you do well, right? It doesn't work. So ensuring that people are following the material while you're teaching it is super important. So pushing out, hey, pushing out a question that everybody can answer, basically a poll question, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, and actually seeing that people are getting it versus when you stop and say, hey, does everybody get it? You remember what would happen in person when people said that? They all slump down in their chairs. It's even worse on Zoom. If I were to say, hey, does everybody get what Karan and I are talking about right now? Like, right? Crickets. So being able to push content out to people that they can interact with and ensure that they understand it before you move on is critical, because both those things factor greatly into retention, right? If students aren't engaged, aren't showing up, aren't understanding the material, they're not going to make it, right? And at the end of at the end of the day, all of our jobs is to make sure that they get that career and they get that job placement. So I appreciate the question. That's hopefully it was insightful and helpful.
Luke, to build on that, I think one of the unique challenges, but also opportunities for career colleges is that the learning environment isn't always your traditional classroom, right? So it's not always this like lecture environment that may be even less conducive to Zoom than, you know, the irony of all this is that we're doing this over Zoom.
Yeah.
So that's not lost on me, but would love to understand, like, how should schools really be thinking about that? And that, like, okay, I've got these varied learning environments. How am I really thinking about attendance and engagement across that entire spectrum of environments?
Yeah. So, you know, this is where I think most ed tech companies fall down when it comes to the career education market, because the career education market has one form of learning, and it's kind of theory-based, classroom-based learning. I sit there, I listen to a lecture, I take a quiz, I take a test, I get a grade. In career education, we have much more hands-on occupations. We have clinicals and labs where people are actually going out to the field. We have externships where they're in a place that they could one day work, right? So I think ensuring that whatever platform you're using has that cross-environment functionality to drive attendance, to drive engagement, to drive community, like you mentioned, regardless of if it, wherever they are. Because, in today's age with career schools, like they're spending almost more time in some cases in that face-to-face kind of hands-on learning environment. So that's where I just caution people is like, don't go out and adopt the digital arsenal of tools that you've seen traditional colleges using, because the career training space is so much different. You have experiential learning. You don't have traditional learning happening. And I think GetSet is really interesting because it plays right into that, right? Like you can create this community for people regardless of where they can connect and interact, regardless if they're at an externship, at a clinical, in their lab, or online, right? Doing some asynchronous work. It's interesting.
Yeah, and to build on that, Luke, I think the thing that we're really trying to help schools work on is this. I think it's a huge opportunity, right? Which is a lot of career schools have a great alumni base, right? And a lot of schools are fortunate that in a traditional, let's say, enrollment meeting, right, where students are coming in, an open house of some sort, sometimes schools are fortunate that they've got alumni that are willing to come in and have that conversation, be like, look, and especially I love it when the alumni show up in like work outfit, right? It's like very authentic. It's like the story is clear. And I think the power of doing it online is, first of all, you're not reliant on that specific person being available to come in from work on that day. The second thing is you can drive a lot of personalization, right? So let's say I'm a parent of 2 children. I may have this notion in my head that like, yeah, I mean, how am I going to go to school? I have to think about childcare. You got to go to school. I also have a job. Like, I don't know how I'm going to balance these things. But now I get connected with 3 other parents that have literally done the program that I'm interested in. And all of a sudden it becomes a lot more realistic and feasible. To give you a really fascinating example, we have a decent sized institution that we work with where we did a little bit of kind of embedded surveying of their students. And we asked them, like, do you think that most of your classmates are working adults? And what was fascinating is, even though from the demographics of the institution, something like 85% were, only about 50% of students were like, yeah, I think that's who my classmates are, right? So students, one of the funniest, not funniest, it was a very sweet comment rather, was from a mom who said, I think everyone else here has probably got like this way easier life. And so I just feel like I'm behind the 8 ball all the time. And for her to then have the opportunity to realize that there were many other people in her situation who were also balancing all of these life responsibilities, I think was really empowering. Or like, to give you one other example, we had a parent post, I totally forgot to pick my child up from daycare. And the daycare called me like 4 times. I had 4 missed calls. and I finally got there and I feel really crappy, right? And within 10 minutes, you had 5 other parents posting like, oh, don't worry, I've done that too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's just that feeling. And I think especially when students, for all the schools that are on the calls, you think about all your new students, your existing students, they kind of had already met each other before the pandemic started. But all of the ones that are starting now, they don't really know anyone, right? Like, yeah, Luke and I are attending the same class together, but we all feel kind of awkward. I don't want to like chat Luke in Zoom and be like, hey, Luke, what's your snap? That's a little, it's a little awkward, right? Maybe Luke thinks I'm creepy for doing that. So to give them a space where you're like, by the way, this is just for our students. You guys are great. You want to be connected to each other. That's really empowering for them. And I think it's not just about purely retention, right? Obviously it manifests itself in retention, but these are the people that are your future brand ambassadors. These are the people that are telling their friends and family, oh my goodness, I had such a great time in that cosmetology program. And it really set me up for success, right? And then for schools to realize that those are also your future alumni, so they're also going to help you with enrollment and retention in the future.
Karan, I want to throw up this slide because I think it plays very, very well into what you're saying. So let me share this again. Whoops, that's not the right. So. And it plays perfectly into what you're talking about. And I think we forget about this like way too often. And the college experience goes so far beyond, my 1,000 hours to get my certificate or to get my, degree. There's so much more that goes into this. And so when you talk about connected to the students, building that community, talking with, alumni, right, that can be huge brand ambassadors. Like when we talk retention, too often it's solely about classes and academics, right? Like there's so much more that goes into it. So I wanted to fire this up because I think it plays well into your previous story.
Yeah. I mean, I think for all the folks on the call today, just reflect on maybe one of your favorite meals that you've had at a restaurant, right? Think of anything that you're like, man, I would love to be back at that restaurant right now, right? And those are the kinds of meals that some of us are missing during the pandemic. We're like, oh, I wish I could be there, but it's not purely about the food you ate, right? It's not that you had this amazing pasta dish or these amazing tacos or this incredible kung pao chicken or butter chicken, right? It's that you were at that restaurant and the restaurant had a great atmosphere, and maybe your server was incredibly friendly and you and your server had this great conversation. And more importantly, it's that you were at the restaurant with like, someone that you really cared about or with a really large group of friends. And that's what allowed you to have this amazing experience. It wasn't just the food. And so as you think about why these students love your school, it's really a great opportunity to realize that they love each other. They love all these other things that you give them and the meaning that you're bringing to their lives. So let's remember that just like a restaurant is about much more than the food, your school is about much more than the classes and the degree. Hey, Luke, should we take a look at some of the Q&A that's coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. I just saw a couple get fired in, so let's pull that up. Of course, my Q&A button isn't clicking.
Here, why don't I take it? So one's directed specifically at me, Luke, and I'll have you do the other one. So the one that says, question for Karan, do administrators know that the students know that administrators are listening to their conversations online? This is a fantastic question, and one we get all the time. So we've surveyed students repeatedly to say, how do you feel about the fact that your school can see what you're talking about? I think that students are much more savvy that there's really no privacy in the world, in kind of a sad way, but 90% of students said that I'm glad the school is listening and cares enough. So if you think back to that example I gave you guys about the program, that there was a rumor that, hey, just because the head of the program resigned, it's going to go away. Students were very happy that the school cared and was listening and did something about it. About 8% of students, 8 to 9% of students said, I'm not thrilled. I don't really like that the school is listening, but I get enough value out of the community, the GetSet community, that I'm going to keep using it. And about 1 to 2% of students, depending on the institution, said, I really don't like that. I'm going to stop using GetSet. So we do tell them at the beginning, obviously, you know, as you guys all know, with terms and conditions, not everyone reads everything. So it doesn't mean that it's perfect for everyone, but we've been pleasantly surprised that students actually really like that schools care enough. And just so you guys know, there is a feature where once people are connected, so let's say Luke followed me and I follow Luke, at that point I can have a private chat with Luke. Now, just so you guys are aware, the chats themselves are private, but we have a content monitoring engine, which is monitoring for harm to self, harm to others. And you guys can add some key terms that if you're worried, like the student writes like the word, I'm thinking about dropping out. And so basically if it triggers one of those like watched terms, we'll still let you know what the content of the chat was. And we tell students that there are a few terms for your own well-being and safety that the school is still monitoring. Luke, let me, so a question for you, Luke. Will the changes schools have made in response to the pandemic, bolstering online offerings, creating digital communities, stick around after the pandemic is controlled?
Yeah, so great question. You know, I think COVID is not a, is really an accelerant of a trend, right? I don't view it at all as, it's this big thing that happened and then it's going to go away and everything's going to go back to where it was. Like, it's an acceleration of what's already been happening. So schools have already been embracing blended learning, right? Leveraging online tools for their theory portions and you know, the in-person piece for their lab clinical externship. But with what's happening, we're seeing this huge, you know, I think literally over the course of 6 months, Karan, we've evolved 10 years into the future. Yeah. Because now we're seeing schools pick up these digital tools, right, that are enabling them to have much clearer insight into a lot of different areas, right? You talked about interesting data points and schools being able to view that. Like, we see amazing data all the time in our system where students that attend class, you know, they show up 5 minutes early. Like, they get a better grade.
Yeah.
Right? Students that engage in their community and social chats and talk with their students more frequently, they get a better grade. They get placed into a job quicker. So I think, you know, schools have really been have been thinking about blended for a long time, and this has only forced their hand. Post-pandemic, I don't think anything you know, really goes away. I think obviously if you can create a great digital experience online, you can take that experience and leverage it in the classroom. So CourseKey is used all the time in physical classrooms, in online classrooms. We're built for any environment, just as GetSet is. So, you know, we look at it as an accelerant versus a kind of a one-off, you know, thing that's happening right now.
Great, Luke. Luke, another question for you. If my school adds mobile devices to online courses, how can we ensure students aren't distracted on other phone apps?
Yeah, that's a great question. So CourseKey's built technology that really creates verification around attendance and ensuring that engagement's happening regardless of the environment, whether it's a classroom or online. So with our mobile apps, we actually use Face ID to check people in. So just like you use to log into your bank, you scan a picture of your face, it verifies it's you, you're checked in. And then when you navigate, we basically want to watch and ensure that if you navigate out of the app, right, you're aware that the school is aware. So ensuring that you're peppering questions, right, that keep people engaged, that keep people at the tip of their seats on their computers watching and paying attention, ensures that they're not going to Instagram, right? And that's so important in an online setting because you're not in the classroom watching people, right? So you got to keep people engaged by pushing out really, you know, assessments, pushing out content that the students have to interact with, you know, having frequent attendance check-ins, all these things that really drive success at the end of the day for your students.
Great, Luke. There are two GetSet specific questions that I want to address, one from Linda and one from another attendee. So one, if you're an existing CourseKey customer, we obviously, GetSet is an additional cost, but it's a relatively small cost. So Linda, I would love to follow up with you one-on-one afterwards and connect you with our team. And another important question is, how long does it take to get GetSet set up? Most schools are up and running in about 3 weeks. But it's not 3 weeks of work. It's really that we just need to have a couple of conversations to figure out how to sit inside your orientation and how to get set up. And my biggest recommendation to everyone who's thinking of setting up an online community is please, 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 whether it's GetSet or any other online community that you're setting up, first start with your existing students before you invite students in a new start. And our suggestion is to give like a week or two with existing students. And one of the things that we've built into GetSet are what we call prompts, where the existing students are asked a set of questions. Some of these are ones that we use across every school we work with, like, why did you choose this school? And I know that may sound silly because you're like, well, these new students are starting at my school. Why do they need to hear? They're already enrolled. We found that getting that buy-in and helping those new starts feel really good about the fact that they're at your school is so valuable, because it's building that positive sentiment from day one. And the second thing is, it shows them that whatever challenges I may run into here, between the school's resources and support and my peers' resources and support, I can get through any of those challenges. So one of the other questions that we like to have students answer is, what is a challenge you've overcome since starting school? And so that gives them the chance to say, I had a really hard time figuring out childcare at first, but then like my dad offered to help and my aunt offered to help and we figured it out. Or, you know, I was struggling with like the online learning format. I'd never really learned online before. And then another student showed me like, you know, some tricks for Zoom and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I got better at it. So like I said, about 3 weeks is the elapsed time that it takes from the time you say, yes, let's do it, to being live. But in terms of hours of work, it's pretty short. And like I said, I'm happy to follow up. Luke, do you want to just put the last one up so everyone has our email addresses if they have questions about our products? So you can just email us at graduate@getset.com, and we'd love to follow up with you. Another question which seems GetSet oriented is, which school departments typically monitor the student conversations? Great question. It's usually student services. That said, obviously when schools are using GetSet as for enrollment as well, the admissions office is very keen to see what concerns are coming up. One of the things that is easy to see is that we don't just show you what students are liking and commenting on and writing. We actually show you what they're searching for. So we jokingly say that's like Inception, right? Like they're not ready to write about it, but they're searching for it. So they're thinking about it at an earlier stage. And that's the chance for you to get ahead of the curve. So imagine that you have a program where it's like an allied health program where there's some sort of certification that your students need to complete. And you see students searching for like things related to the examination or something about stress, right? That's an opportunity then to say, okay, show me all the students that are searching for this. Let's send a message out to them. One really quick thing I want to jump on, which is actually related to this other question, which is, and Luke, you should answer this one too. Absolutely. How would you recommend to improve student engagement and student morale, but ensure they're abiding by our policies? So this is really, really, I mean, a very thoughtful question, which is, how do you shape your students' behavior at scale? And I think this is another thing that the kinds of tools that are available today to you allow you to do this. So one of the things that we don't advertise very heavily on the website on GetSet is we have a platform called Influence. And the idea behind the Influence engine is you have some students that are your role model students, right? They're like Luke. They're always on time, always thoughtful. They're always conscientious. So you're like, how do I get Karan to be more like Luke, right? You could send me an email and said, hey, you know, these are our policies around social distancing when you're at campus. We really need you to make sure that you come in this time frame, et cetera, et cetera. right? But you're a little worried, like my students aren't following these policies I've set up around social distancing. So you could send me an email to tell me that, or you could grab Luke's story from the GetSet community where Luke is talking about the importance of it. Luke is like, it really sucks that I can't hug my friends like when I see them in class, like this is a bummer. It feels a little bit weird sitting so far away, but I know we're doing this for each other's own well-being. And you know, we don't know when the pandemic will end, but we're in this together. And if we don't screw it up, then we're all gonna get to have this in-class experience that we can't if people break these policies. Now you send Luke's story to me instead of an official school message. And our data so far says that when you get a message from a peer instead of from the school, you're 2.5x more likely to kind of comply or adopt that behavior. So it's a really powerful tool. Again,
I absolutely love that. And I think it reminds me of what my mother used to always do to me, which is not tell you, right? Because if she said, Luke, like, what are you doing? You need to do this. I do the opposite. But instead, you know, she'd say, hey, you know, if I were you, or I know Joey across the street is doing this, like it's totally a psychological thing that just works, right?
Yeah. Last quick question here is student searches as in general searches or just localized in GetSet? So unfortunately, it's just what's localized within GetSet. I don't think Google would be willing to link up their data stream to us, although that would be cool.
That would be a
great question.
All right. Well, any others, Karan? Is that the last one?
That was the last one.
All right. Well, look, I think, you know, just to wrap this up, first, I just want to thank everybody for their time. Thank Karan and his team at GetSet, obviously working on really cool, innovative technologies that can very much support career education. I think the big theme of our talk today is again, 6 months ago, totally okay, throw up Zoom, right? Have the teachers do a lecture. Students and parents understood it. They knew this was an unprecedented, scary time. You had no ability to get a big, you know, arsenal up and running that could really create a great online experience. But now we're what, 6 months, 8 months coming up on probably our biggest starts in the fall for a lot of career colleges, and ensuring that you've created a tools, basically you set up, right, a toolkit that can give you access to the real-time information that you need, right? They can ensure that your students are happy and they're gonna persist and they're gonna get to that finish line. That you have the data in real time to see if they're showing up, if they're engaging, right? If they're following along with the content. Like these are all the things that are so critical to those two key initiatives that every school owner, every school CEO in the career space care about, which is enrollments and retention, right? And graduation rates and throughputs into jobs. So I think focusing, you know, heavily on that. I hope everybody here got a lot out of the session. I had a ton of fun with Karan. It's always a good time chatting with you, man. So with that, we got one more question, didn't we?
It's a kind note from Dina. So thank you for attending, Dina.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Really appreciate it. Karan, again, thank you for hopping on with me today. I had a ton of fun. And if you have any questions, if you want to talk a little bit about CourseKey or GetSet, emails on the screen, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk and share our experiences with a lot of different schools across the country. So
thank you, everyone. Thank you. Keep thriving. And thank you to the CourseKey team.
All right. With that, we will sign off.